I had put off reading the second era of Mistborn for a long time after finishing the first. I loved the first era and all the characters I met throughout those books. And putting the Mistborn brand on a new series with almost none of those characters felt wrong to me in some way. But I eventually decided to give it a proper try when I started this channel. Well, I recently finished the third book in the second Mistborn series, Bands of Mourning, and now that I've finished all the available books, I can finally say that I was an absolute idiot for waiting this long. Mistborn Era 2 isn't Era 1, I won't try to claim that. A lot of what you may have loved about Era 1 is not in the pages of Era 2. But Era 2 is its own unique thing and does what it sets out to do superbly. But let me not get ahead of myself. Hello and welcome to my review of Mistborn Bands of Mourning. The review will be spoiler free, but there will be a spoiler filled section at the end, so sit back, relax, and let's dive right in. Character. The characters of the second Mistborn series never felt as deep to me as the characters in the first trilogy. That was until I read Bands of Mourning. The characters in this book were elevated to new heights far beyond what the previous books accomplished. Both Wax and Wayne become more fleshed out and deeper characters. Marassi begins to stand on her own as an independent and capable constable. Even Steris gets a lot more development and growth as a character than she ever did before. I feel like Brandon Sanderson decided to take all the issues of the previous books and resolve them in this one. And one area where he definitely stepped up his game was with the characters. There are some crazy reveals and intense resolutions to some arcs. If you're a character reader like I am, you'll love this entry for that alone. Now, I do wish we had more page time to have fleshed out the characters at a bit of a slower pace. There were some moments I felt would have hit a bit better had there been more build up to it. But to be honest, this is a minor criticism since what we did get was awesome in its own merit. So with all of that said, I want to give the characters in Bands of Mourning a well-deserved 9 out of 10. Brandon's character writing shines in this book and I would have given it a perfect 10 had some areas not felt a tiny bit rushed. Plot. The plot of this book is definitely my favourite of all Era 2 books so far. We actually see more of the world than just Elendel and we get to experience different cultures and people from all over. The first book's plot focused on being a detective novel. The second focused on a plot around political upheaval and unrest. This book takes both concepts, melds them together, and throws in some large-scale conflicts and deep character moments to really make the plot shine. It's very hard to talk about the plot without getting into spoilers, but I do think it was extremely well executed. Once again, my main concern was the lack of time the plot needed to really come into its own. There's a lot of travelling in this book compared to the other two and a lot of major reveals and twists as well. Unfortunately, I think this book would have benefited from being at least 50 to 75% longer. I guess I may just be used to the longer, more epic fantasy novels out there and Bands of Mourning does manage to pull off the plot in a very tight pace, don't get me wrong. But I would definitely have appreciated certain reveals and moments more had the build-up been more substantial. That said, I still think the book was exceptional and the plot was easily the stronger of the 3 books thus far. I'll give the plot a 9 out of 10 and I feel like the majority of these scores will be this high since this book was such a good book in my opinion. World building. The first 2 books essentially took the world-building approach of familiarizing us with the setting of the new Mistborn era, along with the advancements in both technology and the metallic arts since the first era. This book, however, decides we've seen enough of the capital city and that we need to experience the world beyond. We see other towns, old monuments, and learn about the history and lore of the people who currently live on the planet of Scadrial. We also learn about more Cosmere level issues and threats that are looming on the horizon. There's also brand new cultures and societies that we learn about and the whole planet feels more fleshed out as a result. There's not much more I can say on the world building itself. This book handled the world building and the expansion of what we already know so well that the other 2 books kind of pale in comparison. So with all that said, I'd like to give the world building of Bands of Mourning a beautiful and difficult to achieve 10 out of 10. The first 2 books had very good scores in this area but neither could compare to the world building in the third book. Absolutely well deserved. Magic. And once again, I find myself praising this book for the improvements brought in the terms of magic. You see, we all know the metallic arts. It's probably the most well-known magic system that Brandon Sanderson has ever done, and with good reason. So with the new era, my biggest hope was to see that magic expanded on and utilized in new ways as the world becomes more modernized and people experiment with things more. And while we got some of that in the first book and a bit less of it in the second book, this book blows both out of the water with the magic. We not only get more development on allomancy, feruchemy and hemalurgy, but we actually see how each one of these magics are developed, adapted and progressed on compared to previously. Trust me, if you haven't read this book yet, you'll absolutely love all the ways magic is developed more in Bands of Mourning. I'll probably go into a bit more detail in the spoiler section, but for now I have to say that Bands of Mourning has been the best demonstration on how to develop a magic system for a modernizing world that I've ever seen. And with this, I'll happily give the magic a perfect 10 out of 10. And trust me, I'm not just inflating these scores even though it just seems like I am. These are my genuine thoughts on this amazing book. Structure. The structure of the book is something I always like looking at, since even great books can be brought low by a poorly developed structure. I look at elements like the prose, the pacing, and how all the different parts of the book fit together. Now, you all know that Sanderson's prose is not my favorite. I've been harsh about it before and I still don't enjoy it much, since I'm someone who loves more detailed and more poetic prose at times. Sanderson, however, prefers writing very transparent and utilitarian prose, and while that's not my favorite style, I am less bothered by it than I once was. Pacing wise, however, this book once again comes in swinging. Now, there were parts that dragged and there were parts that felt a bit too rushed. I won't say the pacing of this book was the best Sanderson has ever done, but he did it well enough to where it either never bothered me, or if it did, it was a minor annoyance. And considering how all the different elements of the book came together, I'd say Sanderson did a much better job of it than he previously did with the prior books. The magic, world building, plot, characters and everything in between came together in such a well developed way, the book actually felt like a cohesive whole and my enjoyment of it was better off for it. So with all of that said, I'd like to give the structure of Bands of Mourning a strong 8 out of 10. Not the best score of this review by far, but still a very good score and hard earned by Sanderson. Bands of Mourning was an epic book that I absolutely loved every second of reading. The characters were superb, the plot was tight and exhilarating, the world was fleshed out, the magic was deeply developed, and the whole book was built on solid foundations. Everything came together to make the strongest Era 2 book we've received thus far. So with that said, and before we go into the spoiler section, I'd like to give the third Mistborn Era 2 book, Bands of Mourning, a spectacular score of 9.2 out of 10. The previous books each got a score of 7.6 out of 10, which should show you just how well this book was written in comparison. But now, before we wrap up the review, let's go into the spoiler section and talk in a bit more detail about what I enjoyed in this book. Spoilers. So let's start off talking about some of the characters. I absolutely loved the internal struggle Wax had with his religion in this book. It kind of mirrors the struggle Sayzed had in the third book of Era 1, where Sayzed struggled to find belief in a religion after losing Tindwyl. Wax struggles to reconcile his anger at Harmony for being put in a situation where he had to kill his own wife. Then you have Steris. Steris is such a gem and I love how much she gets fleshed out in the book. She seems like such a great compliment to Wax, and I'm certain I wasn't the only one who cheered when they finally got married at the end. Marassi finally becomes more confident in her role as a constable and feels less like she's in Wax's shadow. I hope we get to see this trend continue in the next book, since I feel like she's just a bit shy of reaching her full potential. Also, her mini romance with the airship guy whose name I forget was adorable yet genuine at the same time. Wayne only had a small number of powerful moments in this book, but when they came, they hit real hard. The first was, of course, his quote-unquote breakup with Renette. It felt like a genuine step forward for Wayne to so maturely move on from an infatuation I honestly thought Brandon would play for laughs throughout the whole series. He actually handled it like an adult, which was such a change of pace for Wayne. And then you have the epic moment at the end where he goes stone cold after Wax dies. The moment he shot Wax's sister gave me such chills, and then finding out he knew she probably lived but let her go because that's what Wax would have done. Man, Wayne had some powerful moments here. Speaking of which, the whole betrayal plot of Wax's sister felt a bit too obvious to me, but I still think it was handled very well. Besides, I was too busy being focused on the other major plot points being revealed to us, like the plot of the airship and the people from another country. I mean, I absolutely did not expect to get so much information on other civilizations and peoples on Scadrial during this book, but it's been something I've been craving for ages. Brandon once again knocks it out of the park with introducing new cultures and people that are unique from what we've grown used to, but are also consistent and make sense within the world of Scadrial with its magic systems and religions. And speaking of the magic systems, oh boy did we get some juicy developments there. It's like Brandon looked at each of the metallic arts and asked himself how would these systems naturally develop in this world. Well, Allomancy got its developments with the technology from the airship crew. The Allomantic grenade and the airship itself being controlled by Allomancy is awesome and blows the door wide open for new developments to be built on top of it. Ferrochemy got its developments through the introduction and demonstration of unkeyed metal mines. The creation of metal mines that can be used by anyone is a massive development for the world of Scadrial, and it makes sense too. I've always seen Ferrochemy as an ability that's perfect for the everyday person, and now it can actually be given to the everyday person as well. And finally, Hemalurgy had its natural development too. No longer is it this hidden or obscure thing used by Inquisitors or the very few other Hemalurgists we've met. We actually get to see how people have given themselves new powers without warping themselves into something less human. But it's still pretty evil, no argument there. And of course, I have to mention the Calcia reveal at the end. I kind of saw it coming, but I won't lie when I say it still surprised me somewhat. And I hope this is a taste of what's to come, since I would love to get more development on Calcia in the next book. But overall, I really enjoyed this book and I'm super excited for the release of the next one. And before we wrap this up, please let me know what you thought of the spoiler-filled section at the end of the review. I think this is how I'll be doing my reviews from now on, since doing it without spoilers at all doesn't really allow me to mention the things I really want to talk about. Did you enjoy the spoiler section, or do you feel it was an unnecessary addition? Anyway, that has been it from me for today, guys. Thank you very much for watching. My name has been Raven, and I will see you all next time. Take care, everybody.